I'll be hosting what we consider our Connected Accounting webinar series. And our goal of our series is to bring experts from industry to share their experiences, specifically about improving accounting operations and cash flow. Today's topic, as Whitney indicated, is really around accounts receivable in the new normal, and I'm joined by Aaron Muse of Green Hasson Jenks. Thank you, Aaron, for joining us. Maybe you could give a little background on Green Hasson Jenks and also yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So thank you, my pleasure to be here. So at Green Hasson Jenks, we focus on helping forward-thinking entrepreneurial organizations by providing audit, accounting, tax, and advisory services. Some of the specialty services we provide include things like movie and television participation audits, litigation support, forensic investigations. We also provide M&A transaction advisory services, as well as some value growth planning and strategic planning. We do this by providing it to a variety of organizations, variety of industries. And while we are based in Southern California, we have certainly a regional presence, but also a national and global presence. We're members of HLB, the international organization, which helps us to leverage resources and experts throughout the world whenever our clients are trying to elevate their profile in the global marketplace.
Awesome. And remind me of your role at Green Hasson Jenks.
Yeah, I'm the director of finance. So my responsibility is for essentially anything accounting, internal accounting related, including financial systems, process improvements, controls, all those related areas. Great,
thank you. And when we were chatting, you mentioned that the pandemic actually changed some of Green Hasson Jenks' business, right? That there were new services. Maybe you could reflect a little bit on how it impacted your services.
Yeah, so obviously the pandemic was incredibly disruptive. I mean, for pretty much everyone. It was, it's truly been a global phenomenon. And one of the things that we found was that while certain services that we provide that we historically provided were diminished simply because people weren't transactional work was diminished, for example. Other areas kind of were replaced by it. So just simply the fact of the CARES Act, the payroll protection program, all of that business disruption policies, all those various aspects of the pandemic that affected everybody, that provided us with the opportunity to help guide our clients through that. We have a number of experts in those variety of areas, and being able to be that consultative partner to help navigate those issues was something that we found that was very helpful for our clients.
And you had also talked about the fact that it was impacting your own accounts receivable. Be interested to see what kind of dynamics you saw, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it was all about disruption and all about uncertainty, especially if we turn back the calendar and look at the way things were in that March time period of 2020. There was just tremendous amount of uncertainty in the marketplace. And one of the things that we noticed, and reflecting on it, it certainly made sense to us. One of the things we noticed was that our cash receipts dried up initially. Now, if we thought about it, and obviously if you think about it yourself, any type of tactical approach to a liquidity crisis, you're going to separate your suppliers into the mission critical ones and the ones that maybe you can stretch out a little bit more. And so we realized that we weren't necessarily mission critical for a lot of people. The proverbial the suppliers that help you keep the lights on. That's not typically what we do. So because of that, we knew that we weren't necessarily at the top of the pecking order in terms of getting receipts. So we wanted to make sure that we stayed in front of people in order to make sure we got paid. And fortunately, what ended up happening was, I think early April, the CARES Act was passed, or late March, early April. The payroll paycheck protection program came out. Those funds started rolling out in April for 2 or 3 weeks until the funds were exhausted. Once that happened, things certainly opened back up. We started to see payments rolling in, and unfortunately, from that point forward, it was fairly consistent where we didn't see the same, freezing of the cash receipts. But initially, it was a bit daunting.
Yeah, I think everybody felt, that initial pressure and the uncertainty, as you mentioned, of what's going to happen. So, and it's always interesting to hear in the different business dynamics, like you said, How do you think strategically keep your clients, close to you and protect that? Now, what's interesting, you implemented AR automation really as the pandemic was just hitting, but the decision to do AR automation had been done actually pre-pandemic. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the original business drivers that you had for doing this.
Absolutely, yeah. So the timing was purely coincidental. We were very fortunate that we had already started the process when the pandemic hit, so we were well positioned to navigate that initial uncertainty. But we've been looking at an AR automation process for a while now. We initially made our decision selecting Lockstep in 2019. We started the process. We had some initial delays on our side because of collecting all the contact information. So that we were trying to go live around January. We ended up going live a little bit later than that, but in time for the pandemic. So that was certainly a benefit to us. But really the reason for our deciding to go with an AR automation process came down to the fact that we were having some challenges with collecting our accounts receivable for a variety of reasons. But the main reason was that the decentralized process, we have 15 partners. They're supported by 30 or 40 bill managers, who are then supported by executive assistants. So all those various people, all those various participants in the process, were creating some significant issues in terms of it being so decentralized. So what we wanted to do is, and we wanted to bring it to a central format, and obviously with me being the director of finance, that fell into our area. And so we wanted to try to centralize that AR receivable process, but we wanted to do so in a way that didn't change our billing process, because we wanted to keep our billing process decentralized, because we still had, because all the partners and bill managers and all those individuals, they're the ones who have all of the information and all of the knowledge on the engagements that are ongoing. So they're the ones we want to bill. It's easy for me as a director of finance to log into the system and see if an invoice was created. What I can't easily do, or what I couldn't easily do before, was I couldn't log into the system and see if the invoice was sent and if communication had been going on in terms of collection efforts. So we wanted to centralize that collection piece without changing the billing piece.
Great. It's interesting feedback. Yeah, everybody has these different dynamics in their business, and finding a solution that's flexible enough to map, sort of preserve one part of it, but then add some automation to another part. We're going to try and we're going to use some audience participation here. We'd love to do a quick poll. I'm going to go ahead and launch this. The poll is, what are you currently using to manage collections? Outlook or Gmail? Do you have an AR automation solution already, or something else? We'll give that a few minutes. Votes are still coming in. And it's interesting. So it's sort of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So, definitely a lot of people using Outlook and Gmail currently. I know we've got a lot of customers on the webinar today, so they're using our automation software for sure. So there's a good mix in there. Thank you, everyone, for providing that information. Now, Aaron, you were using Outlook prior to this. Were there certain issues that you saw as a result of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we look at where we were before we initiated the automation project, we were contacting people through Outlook. A lot of the, some of the individuals, those 30 bill managers that I mentioned, they had their contacts set up in Outlook and they were utilizing them that way. So that did give us some insight into that. But some of them were simply, remembering they're managing their contacts in their head, so to speak. So, making sure we knew who the contacts were was a challenge. The other main piece that was a challenge was, as I mentioned, we can see when a bill is created. We have always been able to see that, and that's easy. But what we can't see is, and especially when invoices were being mailed rather than sent via email, we found that we didn't know, obviously, if an invoice was sent or when it was sent. So invariably what would happen is we would contact the clients 30, 60 days later and inquire about payment on an invoice, and the response was, we never received it. So that was obviously very frustrating and kind of the main problem that we were trying to solve when moving to Lockstep. And so then on top of that, just the ability to have the reminders automated on a regular schedule, not having to make sure people are doing that, not having to try to babysit or police that, is a big game changer. And again, if we want to stay on top of collections, just staying in front of our clients is the biggest thing. There's really never an issue with payment. It's just people forget. People, have other things that they're looking to do that they're focusing on. Just getting in front of them and reminding them that something's outstanding is really, 9/10 of the battle.
So it's great, perspective. Did you, what was the uplift that you saw or the impact as a result? So you consolidated, invoice presentment, if you will, and automated that and automated the reminders. What did you see as a business improvement as a result of that?
So first and foremost, our collections improved. So our quality of our receivables, our aged receivables, the number of both the number of invoices and the amount of dollars in the plus 90-day column has steadily dropped as a result. But there's also been some kind of cascading benefits of that. So, for example, we have quite a few clients, especially on the tax side, and a lot of those invoices can be smaller. So, when you look at our AR aging, this time last year, you saw, a number of accounts, and that's a lot of follow-up that an individual would need to do. Now, by having the automated reminder, we've significantly reduced the noise in our accounts receivable. There's a lot fewer invoices and a lot less dollars. So what that has allowed us to do is then to focus on the ones that really require some type of conversation with the client. Maybe there's an issue where the client has a question about the invoice, or maybe there is, the client is having some difficulties and they need to work out a payment plan, something along those lines. Now we can much more easily isolate those, have those conversations, put our efforts where the efforts are most valuable, and reduce all the noise by automating the process. And where people just need a simple reminder, that's now handled for us.
Cool. Well, I wanted to switch us into another topic, specifically around paper. And we're going to launch another audience participation, asking what percentage of the invoices are sent as paper. So we'd love to kind of hear from the attendees where they sit in this range. And it's really across the board. It's nice, there's about a quarter of the respondents said 0%, so they're 100% electronic. About half are in that range of 1 to 10%. And then there's another large group that are essentially 31% or more. So about 30% of the organizations are 31% or more. So paper's still a big part. And when we chatted, getting ready for this, we had talked about the fact that you had been at about 20% paper pre-pandemic. Do you want to reflect on where things are today as a result of that? And
yeah, so we have been a paperless environment for a while now. But as any organization probably finds, the degree to which you're paperless in terms of different individuals within the organization and different areas of the organization can vary. And what we did, our anticipation was that we were about 80-20 in terms of electronic versus paper before the AR automation project. What we actually found once we dove into the details and got that back is that we were closer to 50-50. And it was pretty shocking. Wow. It was shocking for me personally, and it was shocking for a lot of our partners who were looking at their accounts and saying, I thought we emailed those invoices, and it turns out we did not. So that was one of the main kind of eye-opening moments where we didn't realize how paper intensive we actually were. And then once we made the change, now we've migrated everything over, and we're essentially, we're probably pretty close to 100% in terms of being paperless at this point. There may be the occasional one-off invoice that goes out on paper, but it is very much the exception and exceedingly rare at this point.
Now, it was interesting when we were talking as well, because I hear this a lot from different organizations where they say, oh, my customers won't accept an electronic invoice. They want it on paper, and it has to be that way. What was it that you found? I mean, when you suddenly had 50%, were customers resistant, or were your clients resistant to that, or how did they react?
Yeah, really not at all. So in terms of being resistant, we got essentially zero pushback. What we found was that the reason they were getting paperless or getting paper invoices as opposed to paperless delivery is because that's what they'd always been getting, and we never asked them if they were willing to change. Once we said that we were implementing a new system and we were moving to a e-invoice delivery, no one had any issues. Some preferred it, and I know, just thinking about the flip side from our internal accounts payable, we actually have recently made a change to an automated accounts payable system as well. And one of the things that we did in that is try to get electronic invoices. We always have preferred receiving electronic invoices, but we were never going to reach out. We were never going to reach out to our suppliers and say, "Can you send us an electronic invoice?" They were coming with paper. We just kind of rolled with that as the standard operating procedure. If they had asked us at any point, would we change? We would have said yes. Now we have changed, but it really simply was a matter of asking the question, and the response was anywhere from indifferent to enthusiastic.
That's great. It's awesome to hear, because I do think, we all want less paper. I mean, it's expensive to store, right, and handle and everything else. So.
And keep track of, and especially when we're getting into a decentralized pandemic where people are working remotely, it just is not a viable option. Right.
Along those lines, in terms of discovering new things as you're going through a project, I mean, you're unpacking. Was there a surprise benefit that came from the AR automation that you didn't think about going into it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the two main problems we were trying to solve initially were the invoice presentment, making sure the invoices go out on time in all cases, and making sure we have insight into that so we can verify that, and then making sure that we have regular reminders that are scheduled and going out so that we don't fail to collect something simply because we didn't remind the client that it was due. So those were the two things that we're trying to solve, and we absolutely solved those. One of the other things that we kind of found as a result was with the invoice presentment, we send a PDF of our invoice, which gets uploaded into the system and gets delivered through the system. And then we also are able to put together an email, and the body of that email we can control. So we've done things like with our reminders, we've very gradually escalated the language from a more friendly reminder to a more kind of sterner collection language as we go through the schedule. But we also, on the invoice presentment, we also are able to communicate certain things. We instituted a lockbox for our receiving our receipts that come in through the mail, and we were able to communicate that right through the body of the invoice presentment. We changed office. We actually were based in Los Angeles. Traditionally, we were previously on the west side in Westwood, and we moved to downtown LA in November. We were able to communicate that and kind of reinforce that messaging. So the ability to communicate with our clients very efficiently was something that was greatly enhanced, and not necessarily something that we were expecting or really appreciated the significance of.
Interesting. Yeah, you start to realize how much communication beyond just the invoice that does need to go out, just operationally to keep things connected. Are there AR automation steps that you want to take next? Is this kind of what's next for you in this realm?
Yeah, so we certainly have made a lot of progress in the past 12 months in terms of where we are. We don't think by any stretch that we are done evolving and done improving our process. We are utilizing the client portal. We do have some ability to drive online payments as well. So those are two kind of value add propositions that we think are very helpful. And part of the reality, one of the things that resonates with me most of when people describe the pandemic is that the pandemic didn't really change any trends, it just accelerated them, right? Things that were already going to happen now just got sped up by 5 years, for example. Things like working remotely, connecting via Zoom like we're doing right now, these type of things were always part of the evolving trend. And so the pandemic just accelerated them. So I like that this conversation is described as the new normal, because I think that's exactly what we're finding ourselves in. And there may be some reversion once things open up again, but this new normal is here to stay. So part of that, I think, is being flexible, understanding where your pain points are, understanding what the new opportunities are, and staying flexible and staying nimble and doing the best you can to navigate that.
And what advice, so a lot of people attending the webinar are trying to learn about AR automation. What advice, now that you've gone through the process, would you give them in terms of their evaluation and journey?
Yeah. So I think that the main thing is to make sure you understand what it is you're trying to solve. As I mentioned, we were trying to solve the invoice presentment issue and the reminder issue, but also be open to other opportunities that may come about as a result. We found that we had some other additional benefits as a result of making the change, but we also found that we had some changing distribution of work. The EAs and the bill managers have a lot less to do in terms of trying to collect. But now that has become centralized, so we do have an individual in the finance department who has more work to do with that. So the idea is that there is going to be some change, and you need to be flexible and adapt to that change. But the other part of that is that, an improvement does not need to be perfect. There are all these, the solution has created some more work for our finance department in one respect, but that was done at the benefit of freeing up other people in the organization. And so the fact that the solution is a significant improvement is really what our focus is, and what we wanted to make sure that we were leveraging that as best as possible. But understand what your challenges are, understand what you're trying to fix, be mindful about that, and then be open to the other aspects of the change.
Thank you very much. It's always wonderful to hear the perspective of people really using being on the front line of working through this. We've got a few minutes left, and we'll open it up if there's any questions from the attendees of the webinar. We're happy to cover those.